Hello and welcome to the Flourishing Introvert Talks with me, Jo Rawbone. This is the podcast that celebrates the natural gifts of introverts so that we can flourish in all situations. Episode 314. I am not your Patsy. I feel it only right to talk about something topical this week, and I know that's fairly unusual for me on this platform. But it's not unusual when it comes to working with corporate clients and global entities that hold inordinate amounts of power. In fact, that's where my decision to rattle cages came from. Cage rattling is not something I do lightly or for fun. I do it when I notice something that is causing distress, or that is deceptive, or that is unconscionable. And it's usually something that those in power are trying to ignore or choosing not to see. Or worse still, pretending that it's okay. So this will be a short but not so sweet episode about how we handle the decisions made by those in power when they seem to have little regard for humanity. And some who do that will boast about their people-first culture. Tosh. Okay, so even if you avoid social media and traditional news channels, and good for you if you do, you can't have missed that the lords of warmongering are creating havoc again. Clients I'm working with, my dear friends, and close family members are experiencing a whole gamut of emotions right now, ranging from shock, fear, disgust, anger, and even beaten down resignation. That's because there is apparently little we can do when those who perpetuate hate throw their weight around as though it's only playing toy soldiers. There is nothing playful about this. Real people are dying. Real people are losing family members. Real people are paralysed by fear. Real people's lives are being toyed with without conscience. And in organisations, decisions are being made often in the interests of a few with scant regard for the many. But what really brings my cage rattling to the fore is when they disguise the truth with weasel words. Who do you think you're kidding? Not me. And not most of your workforce, so get real. Real people are living with uncertainty. Real people need guidance to navigate change. Real people will be questioning everything they think they know right now. And many of us who identify as introverts may struggle to know who we can turn to in these times. All of which increases our stress load, which leads to clouded decision-making and a decline in health, both mental and physical. It would be wonderful if we could turn to our leaders in moments like this for support and truth. But the reality is, many of them are either ill-equipped themselves or following like deluded sheep. If you have a set of trusted friends or colleagues, turn to them not to continue the catastrophization or collude with them about how awful things are, as that too is disempowering. I believe the most reliable option is to turn to ourselves and, as we stop ourselves from falling apart, which, let's face it, is partly what the axis of hate, evil and control wants us to do, we may be able to be there for others as a role model or a guide. In moments like these, I turn to the wisdom of Viktor Frankl, who you will have heard me talk about many times before, and I imagine I will continue to talk about his work for many years to come. At times like these, we can get so caught up in things imposed on us with their attendant emotions that we lose perspective on what is ours to do, and that only strengthens our disempowerment. I really dislike feeling disempowered, so what's the alternative? It's about remembering the defiant power of the human spirit that allows us to choose our response, choose our attitude, and choose our decision about who to be in any situation. Frankl called this inner freedom. As Marcus Aurelius reportedly said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." So how do I access this power over my mind when I don't have power over outside events? For me, it starts with brain dumping all that is on my mind. The things keeping me awake or waking me up at night. The things that bring tears to my eyes at unexpected moments. The things that I find myself exclaiming, "What the actual f about?" Then, following Frankl's seminal advice, popularised and rephrased by the likes of Stephen Covey, I decide which of those things I can realistically have an impact on and which I can't. What can I really control? This is about who I choose to be in the face of what is happening. This is when I annotate my brain dump with how I can respond and what decisions I can make. It's important to make a plan and stick to it. Do you know how empowering that is? Because in stressful times, the alternative is to get caught up into the whirlpool of fatalism, that whole "what's the point" way of thinking. That's when we lose any sense of advocacy, which isn't helpful. Then it's about what I can influence. This inevitably requires me to choose courage, offer dignity, speak my truth, act with compassion, and rebel in small but meaningful ways. I cannot change decisions that have already been made, but I can voice my objection where it may be heard. Rattling cages. I can offer a listening ear to those who need to talk about what's happening, but who have nowhere else to turn. And I can show love and active hope in the face of hate or ignorance. I annotate my list and make appropriate plans because doing something meaningful is empowering. These first two are clearly positive acts of self-advocacy that may also impact others. I will then inevitably find things on my list over which I can do nothing meaningful, except I can still choose my response and my attitude and decide not to crumple into a heap. I'm not suggesting you don't acknowledge your fears, anxiety, or emotions. In fact, it's essential that you do. But then recognise that time spent agonising over those things that will not move the needle in any positive way does no one and nothing any good. So whether you are in the grip of anxiety about what is happening globally, locally, or personally, decide where you can focus your energy and efforts so you don't succumb to the insincere, self-absorbed leaders and are not at their mercy. And as Rory Stewart said to us in the UK, it's time to act as active citizens, working together, listening to each other, respecting each other's differences, empathising with each other, because we are neither victims, as suggested by the orange what's-it, nor hobbits who need protecting, as phony Stark badged us. Don't get me wrong, I know this is difficult, and the global situation is a reflection of what happens on a smaller scale in so many organisations, but we are not powerless unless we choose to be. I, of all people, understand how uncomfortable it can be to stick your head above the parapet, and your plan can be things you do quietly in the background that prove to yourself and those who matter to you, if you choose, that you're not to be manipulated or taken for a fool. These things do not have to be grand gestures or pronouncements, but I suggest they do need to be things that demonstrate your advocacy. We see you and your truth. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, then please subscribe, rate us and leave a comment, because we know that that helps other people find the podcast. And if other people find us, other introverts can flourish.
You are listening to an Intentional Media Production podcast.